Hello friends, welcome to the Miss Ink Stamps YouTube channel. This is Lauren Taylor and I'm grateful to have you here for a card making video. I'm going to be using quite a lot of products, specifically stamps from the Magic collection. I'm going to be using the wand from the Magical Graduation stamp set, our little ghost and wet book from the Misery Loves Company stamp set, and then a bunch of images from the brand new Witch's Brew stamp set. I've already stamped and colored and die cut them out. I did stamp my images for the most part with a black ink, but I stamped my ghost in a fade out ink, which is kind of like for no line coloring. And I used my Misty, so after I colored her in with the no line coloring, I stamped her again in the same spot using a VersaFine Clair in Arctic. It just gave it a nice blue outline, so it made her feel very ghost-like. If you want to see that in a future video, please drop a comment down below and I will show how I color up different ghosts specifically for this Magic collection from Miss Ink Stamps. So I'm going to jump into my background. I'm going to use a couple different frame dies from Eieio and Punny Farm, the different die sets. And I want to build a scene on a smaller piece of cream cardstock. This is a Speckletone cardstock, so it's a very light craft, but not quite true white, if that makes sense. And I'm going to use a ruler to help me put a little mark where I want my perspective floor to be on this background. I'll use those pencil marks to get my perspective floor stencil lined up. I'm going to use the middle set of brick or cobblestone look on this background. So I'm just making sure that I have enough to create that floor with my rectangle die, and I'm going to use some magnets and some tape throughout my stenciling to make sure that my stencil stays in place while I ink blend. For the ground, I'm going to use Distress Inks in Antique Linen and Tea Dye. I'm starting with Tea Dye along the edges, and then I'll bring in that Antique Linen more towards the center. I wanted the edges to feel darker than the center of my card, so trying to stick with that when I do some ink blending, although honestly they blend so nicely together, it's kind of hard to tell. I'm going to use the matching cobblestone stencil that matched with the perspective floor stencil that I used. And I lined that up to have a little bit of a white line or a separation between the floor and the wall or the background. And again, using some masking tape to keep that stencil in place and to also make sure I don't go past the edge of my stencil, and then some magnets to keep my stencil in place. My glass board that I'm using is magnetic. I'll go back and forth between those two colors again to create that same background tile feel as the ground. This scene is in a bathroom, and I feel like boarding school bathrooms, to me, I think they would look like this. I think they would look kind of boring and the same. So that's what I'm going for with this scene. Now that I'm done with the stenciling, I wanted to add a little splatter, so I'm going to bring back in that tea dye, and I'm just going to squish some ink on my glass board, add some water, and grab a clean watercolor brush to just go ahead and splatter that onto the background. Once I'm happy, I'll go ahead and set that aside to dry, and we're going to do even more stenciling. This card is very stencil heavy, but I love scene building with these stencils. Miss Ink Stamps has some of the greatest stencils out there, so definitely check it out if you don't already have all of them, like me. I'm going to use a piece of blue cardstock, and I colored in my little potion bottles from my stamped images in colors of blue, green, and purple. So that's going to be my inspiration for coloring in these potion bottles in the background. So I'm using some low tack tape just to keep my first stencil in place, and it will cover the blue cardstock that I have. I've trimmed this down to be larger than A2 because the die I'm going to use is A2, and I didn't want to have to really think too hard about lining up my paper to the die. And I'm going to start with the first stencil, and I'm using Distress Ink in Tumbled Glass, and I'm going to go ahead and cover this stencil. I actually don't go all the way to the center because it's not going to be seen, and I don't need to take the time to ink blend the center since you won't see it. And then I jumped actually to stencil 3. The second one is the tops of the potion bottles, but I was just picking the next stencil in my stack. There really is no reason to go 1, 2, 3. You can definitely do 1, 3, 1, 3, 2 like I am. And this time I'm going to use Distress Oxides because I want the color to really pop off the background and be a little bit more pigmented. So I'm going to go with Cracked Pistachio for the green, Salty Ocean for the blue, and Wilted Violet for the purple. And because you're only going to see the corners and sides of the background, I went more of a diagonal. So I have Cracked Pistachio in one corner, Wilted Violet in the other corner, and then I did Salty Ocean on the other remaining corners. So that way they would blend into the green and blend into the purple and create a fun, like, little circular pattern of color. I really like how it turned out. I think these colors are really pretty together, and like I said, they match the color of the potions that I have of my stamped images. So now I'll do a quick cleanup, and I'm going to put the next stencil, which is the second stencil technically. And these are going to be what is the toppers of our potion bottles. And I think some of them look like cork and some of them look like they would be glass, but I didn't want to overthink it. So I'm just going to use tea dye distress ink, and they're all going to be corks. So all of my little potion bottles will have a little brown topper on top. And again, I'm just going in a circular pattern. I don't need anything in the middle. And that will finish off our stencil background for the most part. There is a little tiny stencil here. It's a little bonus stencil that has different bubbles, and you can use it to create some bubbles within your potion bottles. But I'm going to use that a little bit later because I want to do my die cutting, as I'm going to use stencil paste for the little bubbles. Before I move on, I want to add some splatter. So I'm going to grab my opal watercolors, and I'm going to use what looks like to be the more blue opal color. And I added some water, grabbed a clean brush, and I'm splattering that all over the background. It's going to activate a little bit of that oxide too, so it looks really cool when the light hits it just right. I'll clean up my desk, and then I'm going to grab those frame dies and start die cutting. So I'm using that smaller frame to die cut my tiled bathroom, and then the larger A2 frame to die cut my potion background. Just making sure that that excess water is picked up with a cloth. Now that I have those ready, I'm going to finish off my stenciling so that way it has a little time to dry while I'm scene building. You can see my happy hands. I'm really liking how my card's turning out so far. So I'm going to grab some stencil paste. I'm going to use Beluga, the color Beluga from Simon Hurley Solar Paste. And the reason why I'm grabbing Solar Paste is because it looks kind of white, but as it dries, it's going to take on a little bit of the color that it's sitting on top of and create this really pretty sheen that when you tilt it in the light, it has a blue hue to it, hence why it's in the Beluga blue container. And I just did a few of the potion bottles along the edges, knowing where I would see it come out from behind my tiled bathroom scene. So now I'm going to just do a dry run of my scene. My little sink is going to be in the more back right. I'm going to have my ghosts floating more towards the back left, as well as that wet book. I wanted that to be just like a little Easter egg in my scene. So I'm going to glue those with liquid adhesive on my background, and then the rest of my images, my girl putting her little potion together with her potion bottles, her wand, and her books are going to be popped up with foam adhesive. That's how I like building scenes on cards, is gluing anything that is further back with liquid or tape runner, and then anything that's closer to, I guess, the card receiver, the closer to you in the scene, I'll pop up with foam adhesive. So again, adding the sinks to the bathroom pretty far back, adding my ghost, and then the wet book. I am loving how this is coming across. I love scene building. I feel like it's been a little while since I've put together a scene like this, and it just brings me such joy. I think like I said, the perspective stencils make scene building so easy as well. And all these images, they all work together. I love that I have 3 different stamp sets to build one scene, and that's not necessary. You definitely don't need her wand or the ghost in the scene. You could do this card with just the one stamp set that has the Witch's Brew stamp set that has the sink and the girl with her potion. So now that all my images are on my little tiled scene, I am going to make sure that my potions are dry, and I will add my background to my A2 card base. So I have a top folding card base, just making sure that score is nice and folded. I'm going to add my tape runner to the card front or the card base so I can attach my card front. I like to start with the scored side of my card base and along one edge in case I didn't do a very good job at cutting my card base. I can always trim it down. My potions are dry, so I'm going to go ahead and add tape runner to the back of this rectangle piece, and I'll attach that panel to the center of my card base. I'm doing my best to get it centered using my grid mat and just hoping that it looks centered on the front of my card. To finish it off, let's add a sentiment. I'm going to grab some white cardstock and I'm going to stamp the first part of my sentiment, which will be on the front of the card. And I'm going to stamp "Let's brew up some fun," and I'm going to use Nocturne VersaFine Clear ink. And I'll just stamp that right on to that white cardstock strip that I have. The second half of my sentiment will be on the inside of the card, and I'm going to do just a little hocus pocus. I think that's so cute. And just stamp that right to the inside of my card base. Now, VersaFine Clear can smear a little bit if you don't let it dry. So that's why I went ahead and stamped the inside sentiment. And now that my sentiment should be nice and dry, I'm going to fussy cut around it so it has kind of like a bubbly cut around the sentiment. You could definitely just trim a rectangle, use a sentiment strip die, something in your stash to create the sentiment. I like bubble cutting around my sentiments. I added foam adhesive and attached that to the card. And then I have a white gel pen. I'm just going to add some highlights to some of the images. I do not add any highlights to my bathroom sink, but I added some to the rest of the images on the card. And with that, that will finish off this cute little witch's brew bathroom scene. You know, girls just like to brew potions in the bathroom. What else, what could be better? I hope you enjoyed this scene building card with me today. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. You can find a list of all the supplies that I used to create this card, and you can find even more inspiration here on the Miss Ink Stamps YouTube channel. Bye!